Now that the 2022 NBA season has come to an end and we've had some time to let it marinate, it's time to rank the best players in the world. Before we get into the rankings, I think it's important to understand what my criteria is. What I'm trying to estimate is how much on-court impact a player provides, meaning I'll take a dive into their offensive and defensive skill sets with the help of some numbers and attempt to pinpoint how much value I think they provide in a playoff scenario. Different skills have different utilities in different situations though, and I do place some emphasis on the ability to elevate higher end teams to championship heights, meaning overlooked traits such as spacing the floor, off-ball movement, or even decision-making speed off the catch in some cases do move the needle for me. That's not to say that traditional number ones who carry a large load of on-ball creation duties aren't still very highly valued, just that raising the ceiling of a team to contender status can be a bit more meaningful at times, so keep that in mind as I go down the list. Another thing to keep in mind is that I set a minimum game requirement of 50% of the season, or 41 games, meaning names like Kyrie Irving, Paul George, and Anthony Davis won't make an appearance, as well as the more obvious ones like Kawhi Leonard who never saw the floor. So now that we're all on the same page, and everyone understands how these rankings were constructed, let's kick it off with some honorable mentions. These are guys who I believe each have a notably strong claim to a top 25 spot, and for some, even top 20. Ultimately, I just left off DeAndre Ayton, DeMar DeRozan, Jared Allen, Jaylen Brown, and Zach LaVine. All of these players are so similarly talented that nitpicking the most minute differences in their play can swing them in or out. One way I was able to sort out the minimal differences between players who just made or missed the list was with the help of Basketball Index and their many useful tools. My personal favorite is their new Player Profiles tab, where you can easily see and sort through large amounts of data on any player in the NBA with the exact level of detail you want. For example, say I wanted to see how Ja Morant's finishing ability stacks up against his peers. In just a few clicks, I'm presented with various metrics detailing his driving ability, shot quality, shot making, and much more, with automatic comparisons to all players, ones at his position, and those that play a similar role. This is just one of the many useful tools found on the site that help guide me and many others through their analysis. And by signing up with the code VENUE30, you can get 30% off your first month subscription. I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested in signing up, and with that being said, it's time to rank the top 25 NBA players of 2022, starting with the ever-polarizing Draymond Green. Draymond is one of 3 players who I believe have an argument to be the best defender in the NBA, excelling in quite literally every single facet on that side of the ball. The best way to describe his defensive technique would be everything everywhere all at once, as he just freely roams around the court and seemingly blows up every single action the offense tries to run through his unparalleled processing speed, awareness, and positional IQ. Despite standing just 6'6", his length and timing allow him to protect the rim at a high level, while he's still quick enough to switch onto perimeter players and cause all kinds of problems. He's also got insane hands and a non-stop motor, rounding out one of the more unorthodox but effective styles of anchoring a defense we've ever seen. Because he actually missed a significant amount of time this season, we have a large sample of just how much he moved the needle defensively, dropping from, statistically speaking, the 6th best defense in NBA history all the way to number 12 in 2022. Unfortunately, his offense has fallen off a cliff in recent years, to the point where I almost considered taking him off this list because I'm not sure how playable it is in other situations. He's a below average scorer from every single spot on the floor, so much so that he often doesn't even look at the hoop. It's not just the shooting that's a problem, but now when he gets the ball in the short roll, he doesn't even try to get downhill or carry the advantage because defenses just don't have to worry about him as a scoring threat whatsoever. He combats this a bit with lateral movement on the 3-point line, forcing his man to step up on quick movement actions, but again, how effective is this outside of Golden State? Thankfully, he's a historically good passer and decision maker at his position, which makes him a capable initiator, and he's still really effective in transition. Overall, I think he's a pretty significant negative offensively, but his generational defensive prowess is enough to keep him at an all-star level and earn him a spot on this list. At number 24, I've got Brandon Ingram. Ingram provides great offensive flexibility. It's not every day you'll find someone with a similar physical profile to Kevin Durant who can shoot on the move, handle the ball, and pass at a high level. On the ball, he's not a great three-point creator and isn't a super good slasher, so most of his scoring comes in the mid-range, where he makes great use of his length to torch defenses through brilliant shot making. Off the ball, he's a lethal shooter off of screens and from deep, and works well in the flow of a moving offense with quick attacks off the catch. He's pretty well-rounded both on and off the ball as a scorer, but I would argue the strides he's taken as a playmaker have actually become his most valuable trait. He's a sneaky good passer, leveraging the threat of his perimeter scoring into opportunities for others on the interior and doing so in quick windows. I can't wait to see how he looks as a facilitator next to Zion Williamson next season, but keep in mind he also won't be taking anything away from that relentless slashing because of how seamlessly he can adjust to an off-ball role. This is a huge reason why the fit with CJ McCollum worked so well. In 26 games together, the Pelicans looked like a surefire playoff team with one of the best offenses in basketball. Where they lacked greatly was on the defensive end, and many question whether Ingram was contributing to that or not. I think he did show some signs of growth, and he'll probably have a higher motor when not asked to be the number one guy offensively, but he still struggles to stay in front of quicker players, doesn't have great hands or instincts for helping, and isn't very strong. His one saving grace is that 7'3" wingspan, and a pairing of that much length with decent mobility will always have a spot on a good defense. It's just a matter of actually putting it together. As of right now, I do still view him as a very slight negative to neutral defender, and with what he brings to the table as a versatile offensive forward, that's enough to make him an all-star level player and my choice for number 24. Coming in at 23 is someone who I've considered to be criminally underrated for years now, and that's Jrue Holiday. Holiday has a great argument to be the best isolation defender in the league. He moves his feet very well, he's got phenomenal hands that poke the ball out quite a bit, and he might just be the strongest guard I've ever seen. It's that core strength that allows him to switch across the board, just obliterating drives to the basket from even the best downhill wings, and in many instances looking like an immovable object in the post. He's also an elite screen navigator, which plays a major role in the effectiveness of Milwaukee's drop coverage scheme with him at the point of attack. Where I do think he lacks quite a bit behind the most valuable defensive players is away from the ball. He's not extremely active as a helper, doesn't quite process plays at the level of many others, and doesn't provide much rim protection at all, which is why I'm less confident in his ability to actually captain an elite defensive unit. Offensively, he's developed into a very good on-ball creator. Over the past 2 seasons, he's looked like a premier pull-up jump shooter, strong finisher, and most importantly, an elite facilitator. This added a dimension to the Bucks' offense that we hadn't seen in years prior, and played a huge part in unleashing Giannis as a roller. I do have some big uncertainties about where Jrue actually lies as both an outside shooter and overall scorer, because in the last 2 playoffs he's looked relatively putrid in both of those areas after pretty impressive regular season outings. But I do feel confident in his capabilities as a two-way playmaker, which brings enough value for me to say he is an all-star level guy, and number 23 on my list. Sticking with the theme of two-way playmakers, the next spot on my list goes to Pascal Siakam. Siakam just had himself a career year on the offensive end, an unconventional 6'9" power forward who generates most of his opportunities at the rim, but from the perimeter. He makes great use of his length to get around defenders with large strides, changes of direction, and changes of speed, and he controls his body exceptionally well to avoid contact on the finish. It's worth noting that due to his frame, he's not a real physical finisher, so by avoiding contact, he's not getting to the line nearly as much, but converting in the paint at a much higher rate. He's also got a solid jumper he can fall back on when needed, and has turned into one of the league's very best passing bigs. Because he can get to the rim so effectively as one of the biggest guys on the floor, he's able to create a lot of open looks for the guys around him, and the leaps he's taken as a passer allow him to capitalize. I still don't think he's a versatile versatile enough creator to really lead a strong playoff offense as the primary guy, but I also think he provides value off the ball, where he's a solid option as both a roller or cutter, and a quick enough decision maker to make plays right off the catch. This is while still impacting the defensive end as a flexible forward, stepping out to the perimeter when necessary, and moving his feet well with quicker guys, consistently making proper rotations off the ball, and utilizing his 7'3" wingspan to offer strong rim protection. He's not quite elite in any of these areas, and does have some limitations defending bigger players, so while I wouldn't label his defense as game-changing, it is still a very strong positive, enough to make him one of the best two-way forwards in basketball, an all-star level player, and number 22 on my list. Earning the number 21 spot is the third-year guard from Cleveland, Darius Garland. In just 2 seasons, Garland went from someone who was widely considered to be the worst player in the NBA to a first-time All-Star on a playoff caliber team and a playmaking wizard. He's an elite pull-up jump shooter with a quick and smooth motion, needing only little space to comfortably knock these down, which he creates well with the use of his handle and agility. He also uses these two traits to dart into the heart of the defense on drives, where he's got a really nice floater and again a nice pull-up mid-range game. He does leave a lot to be desired as an interior finisher though, and due to his limitations down low, he often cuts his drives short, resulting in very low free throw rates and less efficient scoring production. In most cases, when attacking downhill like this, he's looking to generate an open shot for a teammate, and because he's one of the most versatile passers in all of basketball, his playmaking in these spots is incredible. And when paired with the threat he possesses as a deep pull-up shooter, this makes him a top-tier on-ball creator. With that being said, he's also a really smart off-ball mover, commonly sprinting around screens and making decisive reads off the catch, which allows him to play next to other ball handlers and diversifies his offensive attack. I do think his struggles as a finisher and lack of size or strength will hurt him a bit against most lengthy or physical playoff defenses, but I also believe that his unique pairing of on-ball brilliance and utility away from the ball make it pretty easy to construct a strong offense around him. Those same limitations show up on the defensive end though, along with his lack of length and verticality. I don't think he's a bad perimeter defender necessarily. In most cases, he's quick enough to keep the ball in front of him, and he's a decent screen navigator, but he's not doing anything to really add a bunch of value, and his lack of instincts for helping or making timely rotations are enough to make him a slight negative in my opinion. That keeps him at an all-star level for now, and just outside of my top 20. That number 20 spot goes to Shai GilgeousAlexander. SGA is a classic example of a diamond in the rough, an offensive star whose organization hasn't really done much to maximize his strengths just yet. The greatest of those strengths is his ability to put pressure on the rim, utilizing a combination of brilliant ball handling, functional athleticism, beautifully timed strides, and perfect pace to beat the first line of defense and get into the paint seemingly at will. Penetrating the heart of the defense like this is the most effective way to force defensive rotations, and as a result, generate an advantage for your team. Alexander has led the league in drives per game in back-to-back seasons, and passes while slashing as much as anyone. The problem is, Oklahoma City only hit 32% of their three-point attempts, good for dead last in the NBA, so despite the many open opportunities SGA is able to create through his masterful downhill attack, the team around him just isn't capable of punishing help. And helping becomes a lot easier in these situations when you don't really have to worry about the players around him as legitimate shooting threats. This leads to all kinds of aggressive coverages and pre-rotations that make not only his ability to get into the paint so impressive, but actually convert when he's there as a scorer. He's not a super vertically gifted finisher, but is so crafty with how he uses his length and manipulates defenders to create very slight openings, which is good enough for third in Basketball Index's finishing talent metric. A strong amount of this work is done in isolation, where he posted elite scoring numbers, furthermore supporting the notion that it's relatively impossible to contain him with just one line of defense. He also uses the short mid-range as his best friend for when defenses are able to actually cut his drive short, which I think bodes well for how he'll be able to adjust to better and better defenses when we finally see him competing in the playoffs. One area of concern I do have with him, however, is his three-point shooting. Just 1 year ago, he looked like a top-tier shot maker off the bounce, and while he still showcases elite self-creation on the perimeter, I'm not quite sure where to land on his actual shot making. There's also what he does off the ball, or lack thereof, which absolutely can be drawn up to OKC not having another real creator. But as long as he attacks quick off the catch and continues to develop as a passer, I feel confident enough that in a better situation, he's already capable of being a high-level offensive engine. On the defensive end, he's played the role of a low-activity guy, helping off of spot-ups, but not doing much chasing, which I think is perfect when putting into context the load he's tasked with on the other end. I don't think he's quite there yet, but with a 6'11 wingspan and phenomenal body control, he's shown flashes of strong rim protection from the guard position. Still, I think he's a slight negative on that end as of right now, and when paired with his awesome offensive skill set, that's enough to make him an all-star level guy and a top 20 player. As for number 19, I went with Chris Middleton. Similar to Brandon Ingram, Middleton provides a ton of offensive flexibility. A wing who's a legitimately elite outside shooter both on and off the ball, and has developed into a good enough passer to consistently initiate offense when needed. He's a quick decision maker and willing off-ball mover, which allows him to flow into quick ball handling actions on the perimeter very effectively, furthering the utilization of Giannis as a screen and roll big. However, he is limited on the ball as he doesn't apply much pressure to the rim, isn't a great finisher, and doesn't create a ton of space on the perimeter. He's able to negate some of these issues by being a ridiculously talented difficult shot maker, but relying on these higher variance shots is where you'll see a ton of streakiness, on some nights looking like a reinvented Michael Jordan, and on others not so much. I think his skill set is most valuable in a complementary offensive role next to someone who pulls extra defenders into the paint, which is exactly what we've seen for most of his career. If that offense seems a bit unimpressive in comparison to some of the guys below him, that's because I also really like his play on the other side of the ball. He's a switchable and versatile defensive wing who makes smart and disciplined rotations, which helps him actively contribute to a juggernaut of a team defense. He's got quite a few athletic limitations that hurt him both at the point of attack and as a rim protector, so I don't think he's pushing all defensive territory by any means, but I definitely view him as a clear positive. That two-way capability, along with what he provides as a secondary offensive creator, is enough to make him an all-star level guy in my opinion, and number 19 on this list. At number 18, I've got the point guard CP3. Chris Paul is still Chris Paul in many ways, most notably with how he's able to generate offense in the pick and roll. He remains one of the best mid-range shot makers we've ever seen. He's great at using a live dribble to force defenders into tough decisions and commitments, and his ability to pass the ball goes without saying. But while I do think he's still able to bend the defense in some ways through his mid-range probing, at this point his rim pressure is gone entirely, and his days of quickly bursting past point of attack defenders on the perimeter are essentially over. Another big loss he's had is to his stamina. In order for him to be that fourth quarter maestro we've seen over the past few seasons, he has to take plays off during the first three, and because he's not an active off-ball mover, these possessions often just result in him deferring to another creator and spotting up in the corner. Still though, there's always value in all-time great passing, and he's one of the smartest on-ball decision makers we've ever seen, which is why he's able to rack up a ton of high-value assists while posting bizarrely low turnover rates. He's also a master of manipulating the defense, which is why I still trust him a decent amount as a primary creator, despite not having the same scoring chops as many others. Defensively, he's no longer the perimeter pest he once was, but even in a low activity role, I think he provides some value. He's smart with how he positions himself off the ball, his switches and rotations are on point, he's one of the best communicators in the league, and you still have to worry about him jumping lanes. In most situations, I still confidently view him as a small positive on that end of the floor, and when paired with his still very strong offensive attack, that's enough for me to label him as a high all-star level player, and my choice at 18. Number 17 goes to KarlAnthony Towns. Cat is one of the most lethal three-point shooters ever, regardless of position, and an outlier at the 5. His jump shot doesn't have much lift, so he can get it off really quick, and because he's 6'11", he can shoot right over smaller players without much difficulty. He's comfortably knocking them down with defenders right in his face and on the move, making him a closeout nightmare. He pairs this shooting with borderline elite driving and finishing, so when he does force those hard closeouts, he's able to shred them by putting it on the deck and attacking downhill. This results in him getting hugged on the perimeter quite a bit, and because he's usually his team's biggest player, this means pulling out rim protection. Not just to a stationary position either, because he's a really active mover, is always involved in off-ball actions, and is a multifaceted screening threat. He's also a talented passer, especially at his position, which helps him punish the unique defensive coverages he's able to draw. But he's not a super quick decision maker, so his playmaking does have its limitations. So does his scoring, as he doesn't have much of an in-between game, isn't a great rim runner, and can't take advantage of mismatches in the post. It's that last one that hurts him the most. In the postseason, I feel like teams are more than comfortable putting smaller wings on him without much consequence, which then negates the unique spacing he provides. For these reasons, I think he's best served playing an off-ball role on the perimeter next to a slasher like one Anthony Edwards, maximizing his shooting, driving, and movement to further push the ceiling of an offense as opposed to primarily creating. I'm much less convinced he can really provide anything defensively, where he just hasn't shown much promise at all. He's not mobile enough to defend in space, and doesn't make up for it with great positioning or quick hands, so when he steps outside of the paint at many times, he's essentially a giant cone. I do think the one thing he does adequately though is alter shots at the rim, so in theory, if he's not forced to defend many pick and rolls or perimeter players, and can just roam off of weaker shooters as a paint defender, I think he'd do just fine. That's in the optimal situation though. In most cases, I still view him as a negative on that end, carried by his offense to a low All-NBA level, and number 17. Next up is one of my more controversial picks, with Bam Adebayo at number 16. Bam is a great example of how valuable defensive versatility can be, fueling Miami's extremely successful switch-heavy scheme. His freakish athleticism and physical profile make this possible, displaying a combination of lateral quickness, length, and a near 40-inch vertical that make him a plausible matchup for just about anyone. He's also got great instincts off the ball, knowing where to position himself to turn away drives, clogging and jumping lanes, and always closing gaps with a high sense of urgency. The Heat defensive game plan is to prevent the ball from ever getting into the paint, and with a high activity helper at the 5 who can switch onto anyone when needed, there's always someone to contain it. When opponents are able to get there though, that's where you'll see a bit more problems, as Bam isn't a great paint defender, nor is he much of a shot blocker. He's also not sturdy enough to keep post players from getting to their spots down low, which can limit their effectiveness against certain offenses. I wouldn't say these are huge problems, but do hold him back from that first tier of defensive players for me, landing in the back end of the top 5. Offensively, he's got some loud critics, mostly due to inconsistencies and not really developing into the number 2 scoring option that many thought he would. Still, I do like the skill set he offers as a play finisher who can both handle and pass the ball. It's the best of both worlds when he's used as a dribble handoff initiator, allowing him to be a decision maker and utilize his passing while not taking away the awesome flashes he's shown as a rim runner. His lack of aggression is definitely a flaw as of right now, and while I do think he could be producing at a higher level than he is, there is still a decent amount of positive value in his offensive game. When paired with his elite defense, that gets him to low All-NBA territory for me, and just outside of the top 15. The first spot within that 15 goes to Donovan Mitchell. Much of Mitchell's value comes from his all-time level pull-up jump shooting. Not only is he one of the most versatile three-point creators in the NBA, but he's also an elite tough shot maker with range extending all the way to the parking lot. His pull-up motion is so smooth, effortless, and quick that he's a nightmare in the high pick and roll, and the coverages he forces opposing bigs into opens up so much more offense. When met at the level of the screen, he's able to use his quick changes of direction, strong handle, and length to get downhill very effectively, and this season he finally took the leap as an interior finisher that I've been waiting to see from him. This two-pronged pull-up on a dime or dart into the paint pick and roll attack made him the league's most productive scorer in these actions, and created a ton of open opportunities for shooters around him. Extra help from the weak side is commonly punished because of how talented of a skip passer he is, and how he uses the roller as a decoy to set up these cross-court fastballs. I do think there are two major flaws he has as a playmaker though. He's still not the best or most willing interior passer, often choosing the easier kickout as opposed to those riskier layup assists, and he occasionally falls victim to moments of scoring blindness where he tries to do it all himself and forces some tough looks. I wouldn't say he provides much off the ball outside of his ability to shoot, so I view him as more of a primary creator and high-level offensive floor raiser. Utah's offensive numbers are a great indicator of this impact, having both the number 1 regular season and playoff offense over the past 3 seasons. His play on that side of the ball would be enough for me to see him as high as 11 or 12 if it weren't for his lackluster defense. When he was first drafted, many expected him to be a high-quality defender due to his length, athleticism, and consistent level of effort, but it's been more than underwhelming in recent years. That motor is basically non-existent at this point, and although that could be somewhat chalked up to the huge offensive load, even when engaged, he just can't keep the ball in front of him. He's got good instincts for jumping passing lanes, which does have some value, but he's otherwise inactive away from the ball and doesn't offer any sort of protection from the rim. I feel confident saying he's a pretty clear negative on that side of the ball in just about every situation, but I really like his capabilities as an offensive number 1, enough to view him as an all-NBA level guy and a top 15 player. Not quite enough to view him as Utah's best player though, as up next is Rudy Gobert. Gobert is another one of the 3 players who I believe have an argument to be the best defender in the NBA right now, impacting the game through his unrivaled ability to protect the rim. His size and 7'9" wingspan are already huge intimidation factors, but when paired with his perfect positioning, discipline, and sneaky good body control, he's able to drive shot attempts away from the paint more than anyone. Because these are the most efficient shots in basketball, making them this difficult or taking them away entirely is why he's able to serve as a one-man anchor, consistently dragging whoever's around him to one of the best defenses in the NBA. Over the past 2 seasons, the Jazz fell from what would be a top 4 defense to dead last in the league in games without Gobert, and slanting their roster towards the offensive side of the ball allowed them to construct some really elite two-way lineups in their regular season. See, building a good playoff defense requires more than just one good defender and a game plan built around just that guy. Opponents were able to consistently scheme out weaknesses in the roster around him with little to no adjustments, and as a result, the public blame gets pointed to the one player who's supposed to be holding it all together. I think the criticisms of Rudy in the playoffs are severely overblown, and while it's true he might not bring as much versatility as some other top defenders, it's not enough for me to take away from what he's historically good at. Where I do think a lot of the critics are justified is on the offensive end. He might have the worst touch in the NBA, isn't a good passer or quick decision maker, and can't really be given the ball unless he's in position to go straight up within 5 feet of the basket. However, there's always value in an elite screen and roll big, which he is. He's a massive target as a rim runner, will finish at a high rate when given the ball down low, and his sheer presence forces lots of off-ball rotations. He's also a great offensive rebounder and a huge vertical threat anywhere near the basket, so leaving him unattended to creates many problems. It's really hard for a guy like that to not be adding at least a little bit of value offensively, and when paired with arguably the best defense in basketball, that's enough to make him an all-NBA level guy, and my choice at number 14. At number 13, I went with the former MVP James Harden. Since suffering a hamstring injury in the 2021 playoffs, Harden has seen some major regressions to both his burst and lift, hurting his ability to pressure the defense as a scorer. He's not able to get to the paint nearly as much, and when he does, he's not finishing at near the same level, especially on his floaters. He also isn't the outlier of a perimeter space creator that he once was, so his shot quality on three-point attempts dipped, resulting in worse percentages. Now, just because these areas have regressed in comparison to former versions of James Harden, doesn't mean they aren't still very effective. He still gets past the first line of defense quite a bit, is a well above average perimeter shot creator and maker, and gets to the line at an obscene rate. For years, he was such an outlier as an isolation scorer that even now with a huge decrease in volume, he remains at the top of the league while still being very efficient. With that being said, at this point most of his value lies in what he does as a playmaker and floor general, generating a ton of opportunities for teammates around him and capitalizing with all-time great passing. There's always a spot on a high-level offense for elite playmaking, which is partly why Philly's offense after the trade looked like one of the best ever, especially when Harden and Embiid shared the floor together. His lack of off-ball activity does cause some occasional problems, especially when considering how he fits next to other dominant creators, but I still think he brings enough value as a primary ball handler to be a top 10 offensive player. On the defensive end, I don't think much has changed with him. He's still not a good perimeter defender and doesn't do much off the ball, but in a low activity role can rely on his length, size, and hands to not be a massive detriment. He's still a negative, but not to the point where two-way lineup construction becomes difficult, enough for his offense to take him to an All-NBA level, and number 13 on my list. He lands just behind who I believe to be last year's top shooting guard, Devin Booker. Booker is one of the NBA's premier perimeter shot creators, using his strong handle to hunt out spots on the floor while creating extra separation with core strength and physicality, beautiful displays of footwork, and deadly up fakes. He's living proof that the mid-range game is still very much alive, but also has its limitations. He's a phenomenal shot maker in all facets, whether it's off the bounce or on the move, but he tends to rely on these more difficult shots as opposed to following through on his drives, often stopping in the short mid-range when an extra dribble or two could get him all the way to the rim. This hurts his scoring efficiency just a bit as they are lower percentage looks and don't result in as many trips to the line, but not enough to take away from what he still offers as a scorer. Because he's so good at hunting for his own shot with a live dribble, he draws a decent amount of extra defensive attention, and while he's not a playmaking maestro, his passing is still really nice. He's a solid interior passer in tight quarters and has good range that allows him to create for shooters anywhere on the perimeter. However, despite being such a strong self-creator and capable facilitator, you'll notice he doesn't touch the ball nearly as much as other offensive players of his caliber. Phoenix's offense runs its course with him in an off-ball role where I think he's outstanding. As I mentioned before, he's a great movement shooter, commonly knocking down long jumpers off of screens, and his catch and shoot numbers are among the best. He's great at countering tight defense with backdoor cuts, and has no problem serving as a screener himself to free up other scoring options. This vast off-ball skill set is how he was able to so seamlessly adjust to the addition of Chris Paul, elevating the Suns to another level, while looking like a legitimate on-ball engine in minutes where he's the primary creator. He's also sneaky good at leaking out in transition and attacking in the open floor, rounding out an elite offensive arsenal where he can serve as either a number 1 or number 2 playmaker and yield great results. Now, for years, this came with some lackluster defense, but as of last season, I really like what I saw from him. He makes up for a lack of length and elite athleticism by playing very physical and tough, and his ability to fight through screens makes him an awesome chaser. He's not a great helper or a point of attack stopper by any means, but he's able to negate some of these issues by just giving so much effort and having such a high motor. I don't think he's necessarily adding value, but I also don't see him losing any. And neutral defense to go along with that offense is enough to make him an All-NBA level player for me, and my choice at number 12. Landing just one spot outside of the top 10, I've got Trae Young. Trae is a historically great pull-up jump shooter. At face value, his numbers alone are already enough to make that statement, but when also accounting for how difficult these looks are, the many ways in which he's capable of creating them, and the distance at which he does it from, you get a better picture of just how lethal this ability is. It's not just from three-point territory either. He's also a strong mid-range shot maker, using his handle and agility to dice into the heart of the defense, and has an elite floater. That floater can also be used as a manipulation tactic to open up lobs over the top to vertical spacers or rollers, and helps him create interior shots for teammates more than anyone else in the NBA. His timing and patience as a playmaker is as good as it gets, bending the defense with a live dribble as he plays a game of cat and mouse to create the most efficient opportunity possible. He's also more than comfortable making cross-court deliveries, so he's one of the few guys who I think has a strong argument to be the best pick-and-roll ball handler in basketball. However, his size does really limit his effectiveness as a heliocentric creator because he struggles to make basic reads over the top of the defense, he's a relatively weak finisher at the rim, and he doesn't respond very well to length or physicality. Miami did a phenomenal job at exploiting his weaknesses to force a disaster of a playoff series, and while I don't think it's fair to judge him on such a small sample, it's definitely worth acknowledging the flaws. When a player dominates the ball as much as he does, any exploitable flaw can just shut down the entire offense, and I think in order for him to truly be an MVP level offensive player, he's got to improve away from the ball. His catch and shoot numbers are off the charts, but he doesn't attack off the catch or move much at all, and I think Atlanta wants to utilize DeJounte Murray's drive-and kick game as a way to tap into this a bit more. As of now, it's not all the way there, but his playmaking genius can't be ignored, which is enough for me to say he's a top 6 offensive player who is drastically dragged down by his egregious play on the other side of the floor. Across the board, there's just nothing to be optimistic about with his defense. A 6'1 guard with no length or body mass who can't contain the ball on the perimeter, doesn't move or rotate at all, and doesn't even slightly make up for it with his hands. Calling him a negative would be an understatement as there's no way to utilize or hide him consistently, and I think it's pretty difficult to construct elite two-way lineups around a guy like that. Even with all of his deficiencies though, he remains one of the most prolific creators ever, and that keeps him at an all-NBA level to me, and number 11 on this list. Earning a spot in the top 10 is this year's most improved player, Ja Morant. Ja might just be the best driver of the basketball we've ever seen. He uses his handle and explosive first step to burn past the first line of defense without much trouble, but it's how he knifes his way through help that impresses me the most. He's a ridiculous athlete in every sense of the word, twisting his body in all directions as he varies stride lengths and changes speed, all while somehow maintaining perfect balance. He creates avenues to the paint out of thin air regardless of whatever defenses throw at him, but you'll notice he doesn't pass out of these quite as much as the league's other prolific downhill creators. This isn't due to a lack of passing vision or ability, but rather him just being that effective of a finisher at the rim. Through his vertical gifts and mid-air contortionism, he's able to put the ball in the basket down low at a rate we've never really seen from a player of his size, which is why he became the first guard to ever lead the league in points in the paint and graded out as number 1 in Basketball Index's finishing talent grade. The main goal when defending Ja is to prevent him from ever getting near the basket, which is why a large portion of his playmaking is done on the perimeter, after coming off a screen and forcing bigs to close up that space. He's got ridiculous range and velocity as a passer, so he's able to cover every inch of the floor with very tight windows of opportunity, and he even mixes in some occasional manipulation to make these shots a bit easier. Away from the ball, he's not a huge threat to knock down shots and isn't the most active mover, but he is strong attacking off the catch, a quick decision maker, and a relatively smart cutter. When paired with how lethal he is in transition, I believe Morant is one of the 8 best offensive players in the NBA. Unfortunately, he's dragged down by his play on the other side of the ball, which at this point leaves a lot to be desired. As I mentioned before, he's extremely gifted vertically and has great length that allows him to periodically make a strong help play at the rim, and his lateral quickness allows him to contain the ball well in spurts. The real problem is that his technique and discipline at this point just aren't good at all. He often chooses poor angles when defending at the point of attack and dies on just about every screen that comes his way. I do think a lot of his flaws can be fixed through proper coaching and more reps, but as of right now, he is a comfortable negative on that end of the floor, keeping him at an all-NBA level for me, but still a top 10 player. Next up at number 9 is Jimmy Butler. Right when it felt like Jimmy was starting to become too underrated, he went out and put together the playoff run of a lifetime on both ends of the floor. Offensively, he does most of his damage attacking the rim, where he pairs strength and physicality with crafty footwork and pace to just overwhelm defenders. He's not only a capable finisher, but also a genius at using his body to force contact and draw trips to the line, which plays a huge role in his ability to ramp up volume as a scorer without seeing a loss in efficiency. He utilizes the short mid-range as a counter for when he can't get all the way into the paint, and against smaller defenders, he likes to play out of the post and overpower them. He's also a strong passer and great decision maker, which allows him to capitalize on the opportunities he creates through pressuring the rim while almost never turning the ball over. Most criticisms of Jimmy's game are built around his lack of outside shooting and how that hurts his versatility as a shot creator. Defenses don't defend him nearly as aggressively as other stars because he really only does lethal damage as a scorer in certain spots. And while I do think this hurts his effectiveness as a lead playmaker, he's able to combat some of these problems by being so savvy away from the ball. It seems like he's always in the right place at the right time, whether that's with a quick cut, screen, or sealing of position, and he's one of only a few non-bigs who actually does damage on the offensive glass. He's also got a ridiculous first step, so in the event he is tightly defended on the perimeter, his quick attacks off the catch are just another route to the paint. What impresses me most though is his off-ball defense, where he might just be the best ever at his position. He's an elite helper, wreaking havoc on drives, cuts, and rolls to the basket, while always maintaining position to either recover to his own man or jump a lane. Some of the reads he makes to close gaps or just entirely blow up actions make no sense, and allow him to change the game as a roamer despite not being a great rim protector. That's not even mentioning his man-to-man defense, which has regressed from his days as a Chicago wing stopper, but remains very versatile and effective against most players. Overall, he's probably my pick for this season's best non-big defensive player in the league, and with an offensive attack to exceed it, that's enough to make him a borderline weak MVP caliber player, and my number 9. At number 8 is Jayson Tatum. For years now, Tatum has been an elite perimeter shooter, showcasing the ability to create his own shot from outside at a prolific rate while regularly knocking them down with an extreme degree of difficulty. In the 2021 season, he took a huge leap as a finisher at the rim that added a new dimension to his scoring attack, and this year he greatly improved his passing, turning him into a very strong primary creator. He's got a functionally tight handle that's not common from someone with his combination of size and length, and he uses it to consistently pressure the defense, force aggressive coverages, and generate advantages for his team. While he's not quite an elite decision maker or super fast processor, he's more than willing to give the ball up after drawing extra attention, makes great reads when he can see a play unfolding in front of him, and is a really strong skip passer. He still isn't quite a top tier playmaker, as there are still some noticeable passing limitations, and he's definitely not a stranger to relying on tough shots with added defensive pressure. But I think he makes up a lot of that ground by having another gear away from the ball that not many offensive stars possess. As I mentioned before, he's an elite outside shooter, especially off the catch, but he's also one of the smartest and most willing movers in the league, a great shooter off of screens, a capable screener himself, a nice cutter, and attacks closeouts at a high level. His offense just has so many different dimensions and brings so much flexibility that I think alone would warrant all NBA value. which is why his play on the other side of the ball takes him into entirely different territory. He's one of the best helpers I've ever seen from his position, constantly making the right rotation to take away avenues to the paint, and even offering some really good rim protection once the ball is already there. He's still not amazing at the point of attack, but as a man defender he's pretty switchable, uses his physical gifts well to prevent drives to the basket, and contests jumpers as well as anyone. He's a key component in arguably the best defensive team in basketball, and when paired with his ever versatile offensive game, he provides elite two-way value on the wing. That's enough for me to say he's currently a weak MVP guy and the 8th best player of 2022. As for number 7, that spot goes to LeBron James. It's as hard as ever to truly evaluate LeBron, because even with all of his individual brilliance, this is the first time in almost 2 decades we've actually seen him with a losing record. The Lakers kind of reinvented his role this season at the center position, playing a lot more off the ball than ever before, and putting together one of the most impressive scoring clinics of his career. In this role though, he wasn't asked to create nearly as much for his teammates, and because a large portion of his on-court value comes from his ability to make plays, I think this made him look a lot less impactful than he otherwise would be in a contending situation. He's been able to adapt to regressions as an athlete by becoming a borderline elite three-point shooter, and that's while still sitting near the top when it comes to sheer physical prowess. I do think he's seen a noticeable decline as a slasher at this point, but not enough for him to fall outside of my top 5 offensive players list just yet. What's a lot more polarizing is his defense, which is about as spotty as one can get. He rarely ever made a second effort this season, was lackadaisical at best when it came to making basic rotations, and to make it all worse, he did it at the most important position on the floor. Again, I'm not sure how much of this is situational, because in timely moments of engagement, he still showed that next gear, and it's not like the team around him was doing any favors. All things considered, I think he's probably still a positive defensive player in a playoff setting, but that's a question mark at best, and who knows if he's still capable of activating the notorious playoff LeBron mode. So I'm not too confident placing him any higher than 7, but do still believe he's firmly ahead of everyone below him on this list. In a hard-fought battle for number 6, I ultimately went with Luka Doncic. Luka is an offensive genius in every sense of the word, and is the most prolific creator we have in the NBA today. On the perimeter, there's nothing he can't do with a live dribble, generating his own opportunities at will while being a historically great difficult shot maker. His funky use of a handle and perfect pace also allow him to beat just about any defender off the dribble without much trouble and get into the heart of the defense, where he's of course an extremely gifted finisher with one dangerous floater. He uses mid-range jumpers as a fallback option for when his drives get cut short, and when matched with smaller defenders can play out of the post and use his bulky 6'7" frame as a shield. There's just no way to take him out of his comfort zone when looking to create his own shot, and he can do it from anywhere on the floor, being the league's most productive isolation scorer last season as a result. Of course, scoring at this level and in so many different ways is going to draw loads of added defensive attention, which is where Luka's also all-time great passing comes into the equation. He creates more threes than anyone in the league through his classic drive and kick game where he routinely makes obscene cross-court finds, and he's also a top-tier manipulator, which he uses to create for the rim runners. Due to his size and an array of counters as both a scorer and passer, there's no real defensive strategy that we've seen effectively capable of slowing down his unrelenting creation, and that on-ball value might just make him the league's best offensive floor raiser. I do think his style of on-ball dominance is relatively extreme and a bit harder to construct an elite team offense around than a couple of other guys, but there's no denying the results that Luka Ball has produced up to this point. Defensively, he's a very capable rim protector for his position, is relatively smart with how he positions himself and rotates, but he's just so limited as an athlete that it's difficult for me to see him as a real value add. Quick guards hunt for him on switches successfully, and he's got a low motor that's probably tied greatly to his extreme usage offensively. As long as he's asked to create as many shots as he has been for both himself and others, I have a hard time seeing him as anything better than a slight negative to neutral, which keeps him at a strong MVP level for me at number 6. Into the top 5, I've got many people's pick for MVP, Joel Embiid. Embiid has quickly solidified himself as one of the most dominant scorers not only in the NBA today, but of all time. At 7 feet tall and 280 pounds, he has a unique blend of both power and fluidity that give him a physical edge over anyone who stands in his way. If that wasn't already enough, he's also got ridiculous touch, is one of the best difficult shot makers in the NBA, and has footwork that would impress even Hakeem Olajuwon. That combination of physical prowess and high volume creation, when paired with how he uses his body to initiate and force contact, earns him an absurd amount of trips to the line. Just under 17.5 free throw attempts per 100 possessions to be exact, good for first in league history. Because he converts on 81% of those opportunities, fouling him is a major problem. As a result, his overall scoring production is second to none, and because of how unrelenting that pressure is, he draws lots of extra defensive attention. This season, we finally saw the playmaking leap we've been waiting to see from him, becoming a much better decision maker and more consistently leveraging the threat of his scoring into open shots for his team. He's still not a phenomenal passer and isn't a super quick processor, but he's a lot more willing to move the ball, and I think that took his offense to new heights this season. Another major area of growth, in my opinion, was away from the ball, and how he turned himself into a legitimately elite screen and roll big. He's not a traditional rim runner, but he's an effective screener who can drift to the mid-range, pop, or catch it quickly and work going downhill. This is what made the transition to playing with James Harden so seamless. With both of them on the floor together, Embiid's scoring numbers looked almost inhuman, and as I mentioned before, Philadelphia posted a historic offensive rating after the trade. On top of his versatile offensive game, he's also an elite paint defender. His sheer size and presence alone offers a great amount of deterrence, but he also moves really well and has great positioning as a drop big. I only have one real concern when it comes to Embiid, and that's whether he can maintain a high load on both ends of the floor and actually stay healthy for an entire playoff run. Until then, I'm a bit reluctant to go any higher with my evaluation of him, which is that of a strong MVP caliber player, landing him in the top 5. As for number 4 on my list, that's Kevin Durant. My big thing with Durant is that I think people are overstating how much he's actually regressed from his peak level of play. He's still one of the most lethal scorers of all time, who can put the ball in the basket at a high rate in just about every single way, both on and off the ball. In this past season, I would argue he was better than ever in 2 major areas: his outside shot making and his passing. What he was doing from the perimeter, most notably the long mid-range area, is something incapable of being replicated, and he paired that with more versatile delivery, comfort making difficult reads, and overall potent decision making. However, when the playoffs rolled around, he was tasked with being the lead playmaker against a jarring Boston Celtics defense, and they were able to exploit the areas in which he's regressed. His burst hasn't been anywhere near what it was before the injury, and without a tight handle or core strength to make up for that loss, he just can't get to the rim at all anymore. Boston took advantage of this and used it to take him out of his comfort zone, but it's worth noting that despite a huge plummet in individual production, the Nets still had a better offensive rating than any of their other 3 opponents. His perimeter creation, shot making, and passing improvements still allow him to generate offense at a level that not many players have reached, and although his defense has probably slipped a bit from his best days, I don't think it's enough to bring him outside of the top 5 or anything worse than a strong MVP caliber player. Earning the number 3 spot is the back-to-back MVP, Nikola Jokic. Joker is one of the most efficient post scorers we've ever seen, possessing finesse and touch you won't be able to find in most guards, while utilizing his size and power to get to his spots at will. He's just as comfortable using his left as he is his right, has footwork that will fake even the best defenders out of their shoes, and can fall back on an uber efficient mid-range jumper whenever it's necessary. He rarely ever idles with his back to the basket either because of how quick of a decision maker he is, and just the slightest attempt to help his defender out of a 1v1 situation leaves defenses vulnerable to his unrivaled passing. At 7 foot, he can see over the entire defense like an eagle, and because he's such a quick processor, as soon as he touches the ball, no cutter or shooter can be left unattended to. His delivery and manipulation are also top tier, and because primary rim protectors are forced to defend him on the perimeter, he's essentially playing target practice with receivers darting towards the paint and nobody to resist. His quick decision making yields a crazy statistical outlier in terms of ball dominance, where he touches the ball more than anyone, but has less than half the time of possession of other great heliocentric creators. Every play revolves around him, yet it's within the flow of a moving, team-oriented offense where he controls the entire middle of the floor through brisk screening and mid-post actions. Through this unique role, he's able to floor raise to great heights like most traditional offensive superstars, while not taking anything away from higher-end talent around him. And I believe that his unrivaled pairing of multifaceted scoring, GOAT-level passing, and heavy off-ball duties are enough to make him the league's very best offensive player. It's on the defensive end where I'm a lot less confident, most specifically in the playoffs. Sure, he's smart at positioning himself, has great length and outstanding hands, and is arguably the best defensive rebounder in the game. But there are two huge holes that stand out above all and really damage his ability to impact that side of the ball. For one, he's a weak rim protector, so he's incapable of playing drop to a high level, but he's also not nearly mobile enough to keep up with guards at the level of a screen or hedge and recover against great passers, which makes him an easy attack point for most pick and roll ball handlers. I don't think Denver's defensive issues can be entirely credited to him though, as they've had some pretty funky point of attack resistance over the past few years. But now that they've brought in some better defensive guys for next season, we'll finally get to see a lot more of what his defense actually is. For now, I think his strengths are enough for me to view him as about neutral on that end, and with the best offense in the NBA, that gets him all the way to number 3 on my list. Although I believe each could absolutely be argued over the other, I landed on Steph Curry as my runner-up. Let's start by stating the obvious. Steph is still the best shooter, off-ball player, and spacer of all time. He still draws an obscene amount of defensive attention on the perimeter and forces more game planning and scheming issues than any other player in the league. Due to some regular season shooting woes and cold scoring stretches, people started to think of the season as a disappointment for Steph, before he caught a flamethrower during the playoffs and put together probably the most complete finals performance of his career. It's worth noting that former versions of Curry might not have been able to break down such a complete Celtics defense as well as he did this summer. For one, the added strength and size he's put on over the years allowed him to deal with the physicality and length Boston had at each position. I also think his handle is both the best and tightest it's ever been, forming a deadly combination that makes him a staggeringly efficient on-ball scorer. The biggest change, though, was the addition of a new scoring counter with his use of the floater. This added another dimension to his scoring for when he's able to get into the paint and made defending him that much more difficult. These improvements didn't come without some loss though. He's not as agile as he was during his MVP years, his finishing at the rim isn't quite as effective, and I would say he's regressed just a bit as an outside shooter. That's not to say he's had a huge drop off from his peak level of production, but enough for me to say he's fallen from GOAT tier offensive status to just a touch below. Defensively, he probably had the best season of his career. I think he's always been underrated on that end due to great instincts, communication, and awareness, but now he can play with more physicality and has developed into a quality man defender. At his position, I do think he's a slight positive on that end, especially when taking into consideration how his style of offense makes defensively slanted lineups work both ways. All-time great offense and positive defensive value are enough to make Steph a higher-end strong MVP caliber player for me, and in many seasons that would be enough to make him the number 1 guy. But in the year 2022, I think we're witnessing one of those rare all-time level peaks from Milwaukee's very own Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis doesn't need too long of an introduction because chances are if you've made it this far in the video, you're aware of what he does on the basketball court. Each year it seems like he comes in a slightly more improved and refined version of the last, and this season it was his processing speed as a passer, development as a screen and roll big, and improvements as a mid-range shooter that really stood out to me. I do wish he would tone down the attempts on his outside shooting though, as he's the most unstoppable paint force since peak LeBron, and does still lack versatility as a half-court creator, which prevents me from putting him in that upper echelon of offensive engines. With that being said, he more than makes up that ground defensively, where he's the last of the 3 players who I believe have an argument to be the best defender in the NBA. His physical tools, awareness, and activity make him a GOAT-level helper and top-tier rim protector. He can play multiple defensive roles without much trouble, can switch out to the perimeter when needed, and can recover or save a play better than anyone. He's been the anchor behind NBA history's best defensive stretch in the playoffs, and for those who argue he struggles as a primary rim protector or pick-and-roll defender, that number stays the exact same without Brook Lopez on the floor next to him. There's no denying his ability to control that side of the ball at a rare level, and when paired with his ever-evolving, dominant offensive attack, that makes him one of the best two-way players to ever step foot on a court, and my choice as the best player in 2022. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website, podcast, and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what changes you would make to my list and what your own top 25 would look like. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.